My name is Srijan. I'm a NextGen. I'm from India, but currently pursuing my master's in public policy at the Lee Kuan Yew School at the National University of Singapore. My topic is trust and end-to-end encryption, why weakening of end-to-end encryption threatens the global internet identifier system. And yeah, so at ICANN, the main slogan is one world, one internet, right? But that is based on the trust built into the end-to-end encryption system itself. And often it is seen as a thing that only privacy advocates talk about. But I feel it should be seen more as a bedrock of the DNS system itself. And my presentation today essentially focuses on why the issue needs to be a more key part of the ICANN mandate and what are some emerging risks to it. And I would like to categorize this into two major risks. One is the political pressures of weakening the end-to-end encryption. The second is looking at some emerging technologies such as AI and quantum that can dilute end-to-end encryption and affect the promise of a unified internet. Yeah, going to the first political challenge, we're seeing governments move away from asking for a backdoor to something which is called the client-side scanning, which is instead of trying to break the encryption tunnel while the data is moving, they're mandating scanning on the device itself, right at the source. And this creates something which people call dual DNS reality, because if a domain resolves the content, but it is blocked at the jurisdictional level, then even before it leaves the phone or the device that you're using, it affects the universal reachability. Quoting a civil society, which is well known, which is Access Now, they basically said how CSS undermines the privacy and security which is enabled by all E2EE platforms, and essentially it affects the trustworthiness of the channels itself. And some of the recent examples of this can be seen in the United Kingdom Online Safety Bill and the EU chat control. That's just to name a few. We're therefore seeing this movement, and we're seeing a world where there's incentives for the government to ask for something like this. Coming to the second challenge, as there are a lot of digital sovereignty debates, and I think one of the previous questions also alluded to it, wherein there's this risk as governments are essentially pushing for, say, more sovereignty. Ultimately, it risks having multiple splinter nets, as the term is, and ultimately, if there's less trust in the ecosystem, there's a movement towards that. So I wanted to essentially flag that risk. And coming to the technical risk, and AI is the hot topic right now, but it does have a lot of security concerns. Even I think yesterday's plenary session talked about it, how it has changed the incentive structures as well as scale and speed of how things happen. And here, ultimately, earlier, as in Gen Z slang, it was a skill issue. Right now, it has become just a difference of intent. If you want to, you can instead, you do not even have to be a coder, essentially you can run AI orchestrators to deploy autonomous bots which scan the DNS for various weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Secondly, there's also a second risk wherein the AI malware stays in the DNS resolvers, and this can be seen as establishment bots which live within the resolver's infrastructure, and they learn the traffic patterns and essentially redirect queries. Secondly, there's this risk of AI enhanced metadata analysis. And while I was doing this research, interesting risk that I came across was traffic fingerprinting, wherein they do not even, like, hackers or attackers wouldn't even need to know they don't need to break the encryption layer. They just need to know what is the packet size and how frequently it's moving to identify what is the data within itself. And essentially, this creates problems of mass surveillance, and you can basically look at a lot of data and you can try to de-anonymize users. And there's also some interesting research coming out of it, because it's also a problem that's there on social media widely, wherein there are challenges of de-anonymization of anonymous users, but it's also a challenge to the internet ecosystem, because if the shape of the traffic itself reveals so much, then the end-to-end encryption promise can be broken. Yeah. Then going to a third sort of technical risk, which deals more with quantum computing itself, wherein there's incentives right now for attackers to harvest the data at the present and wait for a movement or a moment where quantum computing can essentially break the encryption layer. And ultimately, I've been in some sessions where there's already some research going on it. I think the IETF is working on how we can make it quantum proof and how we can basically change the encryption to make it something which is post quantum. That's like essential emerging risk that we do need to look at. And highlighting why it impacts ICANN's mission again is, firstly, there's this issue of mission creep, wherein, say, the registries and registrars over a period of time are, through repeated requests, forced to become tools of surveillance, and the technical mandate of ICANN itself becomes politicized. So the risk here is not losing sight of the mission exactly, but constant pressures that can chisel away the core mandate. Secondly, a weakening of encryption, ultimately, as some of the governments are asking, should be done. And they are well intentioned. The idea is to create a backdoor so that they can look at some attackers and bad actors. But the problem is, it also creates a door for an hacker or an attacker, right? So it affects the security, stability, and resiliency of the DNS system overall. And I think the most important, at least what I feel, is the trust deficit overall. Because if you're just looking at internet access, we also need to look at more meaningful access, right? So if the trust in the ecosystem erodes, essentially the promise of internet as we all like believe in it, and the amazing things that it can do, can be affected, can be impacted, and this global interoperable system is ultimately impacted. So I did bring a long list of problems, and that leads to the question, where are the solutions, right? And here are some points that I wanted to focus on. Firstly, I wanted to say that while there are specific technical solutions to each of the problems, we need to focus on socio-technical solutions, and it's an academic term, so I'll break it down. Sometimes there's this, as it was mentioned in an earlier presentation as well, that sometimes you find a nail and you find a hammer and you just hit it, whereas there's a need to consult with the community as well, not just look at what is the best technical solution. So here, I believe there is a need to also do more consultation, bring in the policy stakeholders as well. And secondly, I wanted to highlight that while I was attending some sessions, I realized some of these problems are being talked about, but in different silos. To give an example, particularly for this problem, I think the IATF is working quite actively on it, and there are some concerns within ISPCP as well. But I do feel ultimately ICANN can serve as this broader domain where these discussions can happen. And also, going to specific solutions, we also need to open it up for the broader community here, not just have that conversation in silos. So going to specific recommendations here, the first one is bringing the multi-stakeholder model and fully utilizing it. It's one of the best things of ICANN. Firstly, bringing the GAC together on this issue, not just the technical folks, because as we saw, they are part of some of the political problems that are there right now as well. But removing them from the discussion won't help. Actually, bringing them to the technical nuances of it would be a better way to solve the problem. The second suggestion is to mobilize the at-large community, because as we know, it is a primary voice for the individual internet users. So that would be like a good step to take, and ultimately this can bring in technical and political synergy together. Second was, there's also a lot of technical risks here. The One of the ideas was to have an emerging risk mapping unit. So we can, because as like AI is one bit of it, quantum is also upcoming. There can be some other risks in the future. So the idea is to have the emerging risk mapping unit housed here, which can essentially look at what are these emerging risks. And this is, I think, important when we see internet, as we've been talking, as an essential commodity and resource for everyone. And the infrastructure resilience of internet as well. So this is something that needs to be focused. And finally, as I started and I said something about this, that we need to bring it as a more core mandate within ICANN, because there are people who do realize the importance of end-to-end encryption, and there is a whole vibrant ICANN community that can work much more on this. They can serve as local champions within their own context as well. So that's why I put the term as external multi-stakeholderism as well, because while we're having these discussions, we can take these discussions to other forums as well. And similarly, youth and talent pipelines help in that way. And I think lastly, there's, I think, a lot of scope of supporting the country level and regional initiatives. Because I'm from India, I know of a lot of organizations that are well placed or already doing this work. So more support there from ICANN can really help. And finally, I just to reiterate, both political pressures and technical emerging risks, creating a lot of problems within the end-to-end encryption and the promise of the global internet. And what is needed is technical expertise, wider engagement with the community and political stakeholders, and ultimately mobilizing the ICANN community so that they can be champions of E2E. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Srijan. Wonderful job. We are running a little short on time, so we'll have time for one, maybe two questions. Any in the room here? Oh, Joyce, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the presentations by all the NextGens. My question is for Ong on the topic surveillance pricing. So, I was just curious to understand if the data breaches or the data theft plays a role for the same, and if it does, so what are the few recommendations from your end which can be incorporated in order to make a more secure and less surveillance priced system? So, yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you for the questions. And I think there's the recommendation that I include also mentioned the web address to your question as well. I think it would be better if the corporation or company have a better accountability and policy to disclose how our data are being used. And there is like an information mechanism to the consumer that how our data are being used as well. So I think that would be the best way that can influence. And other thing can be includes like legislations by the national level, like how the corporations can utilize our data to things. How can I say, to determine the prices and stuff. Yeah, I think that would be the recommendation that I can think of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Just a very brief follow up. What about if the legislation itself is involved in it? We've known cases where the government was itself responsible for the data breaches. So, what if the data was leaked from the end of the government itself?
Mm.
So, who will govern it or who will look at it?
Interesting question. I will give it.
So for
Srijan, please, since
Okay,
it was your
wait,
presentation.
So, for example, right, the data protection laws do state that even, say, government bodies have to inform if there's been a breach. So, basically, people can take steps to protect their data, but that really usually is dependent on the data protection legislation, which can then vary from country to country. So, yeah, the safeguards are very much diverse there.
Thank you, Srijan.
Thank you. We are out of time, but well, go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing me. Just to keep it very short, excellent presentations. Keep on coming. Don't make this your last intervention. Second thing, overall, the higher goal that you all touched upon without mentioning it explicitly is, and this is where whole ICANN is for, increase justifiable trust in the use of the internet and keep it high. Because if that drops, we're all in trouble. And many of your contributions add to that. So congratulations, and please take that higher goal that we all share, governments, businesses, users, also in mind.
Thank you so much. That's a very good point. Wonderful job, guys. Wonderful presentations, really. Thank you so much. And if with that, we can stop the recording. And thank you to our interpreters as well for all their hard work. Thank you.